Good afternoon, everybody. On the present, we are here for the oral defense of Claudia Patricia Torres Gonzalez, difficulty faced by the knowledge in immigrants learning English as a second language in Edmonton, Canada. Is her monograph, partial fulfillment requirement for degree of licenciado en lengua extranjera with emphasis in English. No more 20 or 30 minutes. Your oral defense, Claudia. Let's start. We are with a teacher, Kelly Fajardo, Claudia Torres. We are here for this oral defense. Go ahead. Let's start.
Thanks, everyone. As you already said, today I'm presenting my monograph, which is titled Difficulties Faced by Adult Latin American Immigrants in Learning English as a Second Language in Edmonton, Canada. But before we start, I'd like to explain why I decided to choose this topic. So I was working at New Hope ESL, which is a private school in Edmonton, and I met many students which have a Hispanic background because actually the 50% of this school has Hispanic population. So not only Hispanic learners, but also immigrants need to learn English to succeed in Canadian society. And also for their social integration. That means that if they want to study at university, or if they want to work, or even if they want to navigate in their daily lives, they need to learn English. In Canada, we have two official languages, which are French and English, but here in this city, in Edmonton, we need English. We only speak English. So this study aims to identify which are those problems, which are those challenges Hispanic students face when they are learning English in Canada. So I wanted to make a survey, which is a quantitative approach, and also a document research to cross these variables and to have a better understanding of this situation. The results and recommendations of this project can be helpful not only for English teachers at this private school, but also at many other schools where they have Hispanic students. And this can help teachers to propose different strategies and to help students boost their confidence and English proficiency. As I told you before, Canada is a bilingual country, English and French, but it's also a multicultural country. That means that we have people from every country in the world. And so I wanted to know how Latin American students experience ESL classes at this private school. The findings of this research would benefit ESL instructors at this school, but also students, because if trainers know which are the problems they face, they can help them overcome those situations. Now, for the statement of the problem, Hispanic immigrants face challenging situations when studying ESL, such as lack of interest, discomfort, absence, poor performance, and in the worst case scenarios, many students withdraw. And I saw many of these problems with my students. Well, sometimes because those problems were related to cognition, culture, content, or communication. So the main question was, which are the root causes of Hispanic ESL students' lack of interest, discomfort, and poor performance? And to answer that question, I also asked others. So, for example, The Hispanic ESL students consider that the topics, vocabulary, and activities, this is related to content, right? Help them achieve their language goals, their communicative content or aspect, and raise cultural awareness of the society they're living in. And these have the cultural aspect. Also related to cognition, their literacy skills in their first language, because they could impact their learning process in English. And I also wondered if their socioeconomic progress was jeopardized, if they had problems related to money or how to fund the classes, and if they have experienced a racism for their culture. The general objective of this study is to determine the main problems Latin American learners deal with when learning English as a second language in the city of Edmonton, Canada. So, because I wanted to be very specific, not only about the city, but also about the private school. That's why I took New Hope ESL as the place where the study took place. Based on their experiences at this school, in order to suggest guidelines for teachers and students to overcome these situations. So once I could determine the problems, I could suggest some recommendations for the school. And to address the main objective, I have some specific objectives. And actually, I addressed the first 5 of them in the creation of the survey. So I had to classify which are the students' motivations, why they wanted to learn English, basically. And also analyze the cultural impact in their ESL process, and also if the content and the activities they were doing at the school were helping them, and it was what they were expecting. And also inquire about English proficiency. So to do so, I use international standards like a common European framework, and identify students' perceptions of the ESL teacher support, if they felt that their teachers helped them with the strategies and they felt engaged or not. In the conclusions, I use the last specific objective because I make suggestions on strategies to approach the problems that I identify. So for the literature review, many of these concepts or terms are key to understand this study. So for example, the study takes place at a private school where we teach ESL, the Canadian language benchmarks, and the Common European Framework of Reference are standards that help measure their proficiency. But not all students come to Canada for the same reason. So that's why we have 5 categories. Immigrants by choice, so the ones that decide to come to this country and they have enough resources to settle down. International students who have to pay double for the tuition fee. Temporary foreign workers, government-assisted refugees who flee from their countries because they are threatened, and refugee claimants, they are waiting for a refugee status. So before doing my research or this study, I read some previous studies. So, but these studies, the first one was in the United States and the second one was in Australia. The first one was about the same population, Hispanic community. The second was about immigrants in general. The main difference with my research is that in the first one, it's more a research, but my study is more like a mixed of a monograph, and it has a focus um, on a qualitative on a quantitative approach, and I'll let you know later on. Uh, so I also used a theoretical framework, and this was very important for the documental research or the documental study, because all this monograph is supported on psychologists, educational experts, and sociologists that talk about the main issues these learners face. For example, I wanted to know how students acquire and learn a second language. So that's why these theories you're looking at are key, are very important. Also, it's important to understand that not all students have the same learning styles, that every student have different needs, different learning preferences, and their minds function in different ways. So we have these models, and for each model we can understand that students have a very wide spectrum of needs and learning styles. And this was key because in that way, teachers can provide the right resources and the right activities to help students thrive in the classrooms. And we can make classes more enjoyable for every single student. Now, as teachers, we must understand that the learning process, especially when we're learning ESL, it's a process that involves everyone. So the teacher has a role of guidance, and we need to understand that the student is very important in this process, and that together uh, make possible this process together. And that's why motivation was also key, and to understand how which activities were more suitable for them, and also which activities could draw their attention and engagement. But also as we were talking about culture, from the sociological view, we needed to understand how culture and racial discrimination takes place in Canada. So that's why the theorics we looked for, most of them are Canadian, theorics that have shed light on this problem. Now, for the methodology of this study, I used two approaches. This is a monograph, so uh, it's supported, as I told you before, on the documental research that I've already described, with all the theories and all the concepts. But the descriptive data is also important, because as a teacher, I had informal conversations with them, so that allowed me to have a better overview of their problems and to make connections and relationships between variables. While from the quantitative approach, um, so I administered a survey, and this survey um, So for this survey, I took the population of Hispanic students, which is around 32 students, but I took a random sample of 25 students through a questionnaire of 11 questions. This questionnaire has 11 questions, and it was delivered in their mother tongue, which is Spanish, because I wanted to I wanted to get the most reliable and accurate responses. And also I chose this sample because, I mean randomly, because I wanted to have a representative and reliable sample. And so after doing the survey, I used data analysis and charts to help me visualize and to cross different variables. And in that way, I could establish some hypotheses. So here you have some of the charts I was talking about. These charts are the result of that survey. If you look at this chart, here we're measuring the highest level of education, and Hispanic students are very educated. I mean, they have highest levels. Um, I mean, 76% of them have post-secondary education. So if you put together those who have master professional technologies and technician, they they account for the 76% of the population. And now, for the English proficiency levels, most of them have a proficiency level that allows them to communicate with others and navigate in Canadian society. They are more independent and they have good English levels of proficiency. This can be linked to underlying proficiency skills or literacy skills that they have in their mother tongue. So, for example, if they are um, professionals, they are more likely to have reading and writing um, good outcomes. However, if you look at this chart, the highest educational level, which is master's degree, not necessarily has the the most qualified proficiency level, and this is a problem because if um, Hispanic students want to equalize their studies, or if they wanna access to qualified jobs, but they don't have the skills in the second language, they cannot have the same opportunities as others. So this is a disadvantage and a barrier to them. However, professional students, they have a more varied, a more varied proficiency levels range, and this that can help them get jobs, not necessarily high qualified jobs, but they can still navigate. Now, the legal status in Canada is, well, here it's complicated because if you look at this chart, most of them are tourists, but tourists actually are not allowed to study nor work in Canada. However, many of them, as you can see, are students. And that is, it's also related to this one, main purpose to learn English. So many of them, or most of them, want to learn English for work and to function in Canadian society. Now, interest for learning English according to legal status in Canada. So surprisingly, as I told you before, tourists are the most interested in learning English for work, even though they are not allowed to work in Canada. While permanent residents are most likely to learn English for functioning in Canadian society and for getting the citizenship, while international students want to learn English for academic purposes, to go to university. Sometimes they have exchange programs and so on. Okay, so Students were asked if their English command allows them to function in all life situations. And if we sum up, strongly agree and agree, it is the 44% of them who think that yes, their proficiency level helps them navigate in their daily lives and talk, for example, to go to the bank or go shopping. But 36% disagrees or strongly disagrees. That means that they don't have confidence. They don't feel confident in their proficiency level, and this self-esteem, their self-esteem can impact their learning process. So it's noticeable speaking and listening are the areas where ESL learners struggle the most. So while writing is just slightly 24%, but reading is their strength. And this is very noticeable because all the time they are trying to have more opportunities. They want to speak to improve their skills, their communicative skills, but they also complain about not understanding when people speak. So it makes sense. English socialization at home. Okay, so this is curious because even though they need to practice their speaking skills in English, most of this socialization is not at home. Why? Because at home they want to speak Spanish to preserve the language for their children. So they want their children to be bilingual, as they know that they will study, they will practice English at school. So they want to make sure they learned Spanish as their first language. Okay, so activities, they put effort for learning English to improve their speaking skills or their learning skills. Many of them want to or prefers to socialize with native speakers. And they told me that sometimes they just want to join clubs or sport teams to have the opportunity to interact with native speakers. But as I told you before, most of this socialization is out of the house. They also want, they also use online resources and lessons to use it in their own pace. Okay, so regarding the cultural aspect, many of them didn't feel discriminated by their culture. About 24% felt discriminated. Some others neither agree nor disagree. Maybe they are not aware that they are being discriminated, or maybe they just don't care. Is the 20%. And after I asked them, well, if you feel discriminated, is that impacting your ESL process? So of the 24, out of the 20% out of the 24 that felt discrimination said that that wasn't a problem to learn English. Okay, but this is the most important chart because this is the most detrimental factor in ESL learning. So they said that the main cause of their challenges is socioeconomic factors. So that means that they don't have enough funds or money to pay for lessons, or maybe sometimes to pay for transportation to go to class. And so it's a big problem. Also, some of them have children and they have to pay daycare, which is very expensive. So if they couldn't afford that, they would withdraw classes. And the second problem was the lack of motivation and the low satisfaction with teacher strategies as the third factor. Now, for the conclusions and recommendations, as the first problem was the socioeconomic problems that prevent students, Hispanic students, from learning English in Edmonton, I would suggest scholarships and discounts based on students' academic performance and participation as a way to motivate them and to encourage them to keep engaged and continue working on their development. The second problem was the lack of motivation. But for the lack of motivation, I suggest didactic activities like challenging games and problem-based tasks. Challenging games would be helpful because if they feel excited and also for this one, I would also include the use of ICT with blogs and interactive games on the internet and problem-based tasks to have that peer collaboration and other activities that can support and help them. Debates and dilemmas stimulate their curiosity and participation because they are using the language to communicate with others, to express their ideas, and they want to participate and to join the conversation. The third problem was the low satisfaction with teachers' strategies. Okay, so for this one, I would say that first of all, as teachers, we need to know our students, and according to that, we can create engaging and personalized lesson planning that includes didactic and pedagogical strategies, and also a curricula that provides them with the content they need and interactive materials. Scaffolding to help them like gradually, okay, to get the level gradually, to understand that some students learn in a fast pace while others learn more slowly. So we need to provide a scaffolding to help them get the goals, and feedback because they want to know what they're doing wrong and how to overcome those problems. So as some of the areas that were the main problems were speaking and listening. So I suggest that teachers focus more on these skills and also try to include ICT with internet resources because they are eager to use them. Equally in the fourth position, we have cultural factors and educational level. So the school, for the culture, the school must reassure their students that they are in a welcoming and safe place. Why? Because if we tell them, okay, that we understand that sometimes they feel homesick and that it's hard to adjust to a new reality, and if we help them raise awareness about the different cultures in Canada, maybe with funny activities like potlucks, festivals, or even letting everyone know about special dates for Canadian and Hispanic countries, they would feel more involved, okay, in the school. Finally, for the educational level, instructors must activate learners' prior knowledge, so unusual and fun activities, but this requires proficiency and psychological tests. Why? Because we need to know which proficiency levels the students have, which are their needs, and how to address them, right? According to their personalities and motivations and learning preferences. Teachers should guide students by providing them with scaffolding feedback, as I told you before. And finally, educators are urged to connect with their students and their realities, to understand the causes of their difficulties and think out of the textbook. Lesson planning to better address student learning needs with differentiated learning. So if we are in Canada, we can think about asking students to bring realia, such as newspapers or flyers from a shopping mall, and try to use engaging material, different strategies. Maybe we can plan a field trip to a shopping mall and ask them and make them to ask for the prices, because there are many things that we can do. So thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Okay, Claudia, thank you so much. So yeah, I have one question here. You mentioned two different pieces of research made before that are related to your study topic, and those reports were developed in the US. Am I right? In
Yes.
Australia? Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
did you search about similar studies made before in Canada?
Yes,
Did you?
of course. I searched, but they didn't have, like, they weren't similar. So maybe it's something we must explore more here in Canada. We must study more, yes, because they use other populations, or they talk about immigrants in general, or also ESL, but not for immigrants. So it was like different. They had different approaches. For example, one study was about ESL classes, but for those children of Hispanic immigrants, and it's a different population, right? And they have different problems, because it was more about and it was also about an elementary setting. It was about kids, and it was about the children of Hispanic immigrants. So they are not immigrants. Yes, they are ESL learners, but their problems are very different.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So, and how did you select the sample population for? So, did you apply the survey directly with the students? How did you select that population?
Okay, so we have approximately 32 students, Hispanic students at the school, but I just chose 25 randomly. So I had a list, and I asked somebody else to choose names. Yeah, but that person wasn't a student, or it had nothing to do. It was my husband, so it has nothing to do with the school, and that person didn't know the students. So because I tried to really choose them randomly.
Okay, perfect. So you mentioned all the barriers Hispanic learners face to learn English there in Canada. So why do you consider is that information important?
Okay, so this information is very important because if the school, I mean New Hope ESL school, follows my recommendations, so they can um, help teachers to provide students with best resources and activities and strategies to help them learn English. And also because if they know these problems, they can prevent them, right? And they could know how to approach them.
Okay, perfect. And will you plan to continue working with that school? I mean, to help them to apply your recommendations?
Well, I suggested, but right now that school is closed because of
Okay.
COVID. Yeah. But hopefully in the future, yes, I would like.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Claudia. So I don't have more questions. I don't know if Professor Jairo would like
Yes,
to.
yes, excellent. Learning English as a second language enables them to communicate with people who speak English in so many different countries. Um, but the ESL have three competencies are developed, especially in synergy in an interactive learning environment. This is an important competency. The competency interacts oral in English is, for example, is the backdrop for the other two competencies. Uh, this oral interaction using these ESL competencies as a student speak English in all classroom situation. What do you consider this is an interacts orally or learning interacts environment in your monograph?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
The learning environment, interactive learning environment, what you considered in your monographs, interactive learning environments used by institution, interactive learning environment.
Okay, so the institution actually for interactive learning environments, after COVID, we had blogs, and we also had Facebook groups and some other interactive strategies, and the use of some games, interactive games. They were very useful to help students engaged. But I would say that there are many other resources we can use to keep students learn. So yes, these learning environments in the classroom. Now, in in-person classes, it's key to have a student-centered approach. So that means that teachers are guiding the whole process, but it's a more friendly environment, especially if you want them to feel safe and welcomed to this country. So I think communication is key among students and teachers in the classroom. Um, so yeah, so I would say that that's the most important thing, to have a learning environment where students can thrive.
Okay, regarding the rights in text production, composition, text for a student using ESL, with the with tools were used for it, for writing and
For
producing
writing,
of text. Yes, writing.
okay. So for writing, actually, it depends because the school has different courses. Some of the courses are uh, purely ESL. Some other courses are to get students prepared for proficiency exams such as CELPIP and IELTS. So for CELPIP and IELTS, uh, they had to write letters for the writing tasks. For ESL courses, they had to write emails and informal writing communications like take notes and other daily based writing tasks or simple tasks like writing a text message to a friend. And so the writing tasks varied according to the class.
Okay, finally, Claudia, um, you wrote in an introduction. Your introduction, this study aims to identify which are the challenges. Which were those challenges? Please mention three challenges that you faced during the learning process, uh, as you aforementioned, using a survey and proposing alternatives from a document research.
Yes, as I told you before, the main challenges these students faced was the socioeconomic problem. That means that they didn't have enough money to pay the tuition fee, even though